we need to talk about this book.
In a corner with her books, glitzy reads, and she's hooked. Fantasy and love collide, takes a journey deep inside. Pages turn, the world is fast, magic spells.
Hi everyone, Glitzy Reads here. We are going to talk about a thriller book today. I'm not a big thriller fan, and that's just simply because I don't feel like I've exposed myself to a lot of thrillers, but I am trying to give them a go. And my very first book that I've read, so not an audiobook, that I picked up this month was The Teacher by Freida McFadden. I read it on my Kindle, and I want to kind of take this video into two stages. One, spoiler free, and then the second half, which is going to be the longer half, spoilers. So if you haven't read the book and you are interested in reading it and you get to that section that's going to have letters that say spoilers, please pause it and go read it for yourself before you watch. A lot of my teacher friends have read this book, and I pretty much guarantee they had a different opinion than me. So it'll be interesting to see how they might react to this video. But regardless, we're still going to talk about it. So I had some very strong feelings towards this book after reading it. And it's almost 400 pages long, but it did not feel 400 pages long. Now, of course, I think everybody, when they read on their Kindle, they're typically going to read at a faster pace. And that was the case for me, mainly because I find I'm bringing my Kindle to places that I wouldn't normally bring my book. I like to read in bed a lot, but if I want to go sit in the couch but not turn the light on, I find myself reading out in the living room more with my Kindle than a regular book, because the screen naturally lights up and I don't have to turn a bunch of lights on in order to see the words. So for that case, I think just being the accessibility of the Kindle helped me read a lot faster. But not just that, but Freida's writing was very fast-paced. I think a lot of this had to do with the short chapters. So I would find myself reading a chapter, checking the time for the next chapter, and it would say 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 7 minutes. And I'd be like, oh, only that long? Only 2 minutes? Only 7 minutes? I need to read another chapter. And then I would just find myself in this loop of oh, all of the chapters are 5 to 7 minutes. The longest chapter that I recall reading, and there may have been a longer one, but the longest one I remember checking was 11 minutes. That's not that long. I mean, that's a short chapter in most of the books that I read. So the pace of the book was very fast, and I know that the point of view switched a lot. So you're not necessarily getting burnt out on one character's thoughts. You're kind of getting a well-rounded frame of a story. And I think her writing, it was intriguing enough. I wouldn't say it's the best, most proper writing, but it immersed me in the story enough to keep reading. And I like when a book is an easy read for just not super intense style of language. If it's just very casual, I find that really easy to pick up and read. And so when I was reading her style of writing, I was really enjoying just the plot and the way that she just set up her chapters. It was really nice. Most of them ended in a way that you wanted to keep reading, which is, you can't end on a cliffhanger every chapter, obviously, but just the way that she decided to abruptly stop a scene right before it was about to happen, switch to the different character point of view, and then go back and revisit the scene, and now you know what's happening. I thought that was really clever, and it didn't get you burnt out. It kind of almost made you think oh yeah, this was happening. Okay, back into this. It's kind of like when you're watching a TV show and they go from one scene to the next scene, and then you go back to I'm really big into watching Grey's Anatomy right now. So Like they might have a scene where you're visiting this one patient and they flip to a different patient, but this other patient was in surgery. So like now you're going back to this patient and seeing like, did they live? Did they die? Did something, you know, the one that I most recently watched was like the water pipe busting over top of like this surgery that's happening in the organs. They are all having to like huddle over the organs. That's one that I remember. But like, oh my goodness, this action random thing that you didn't expect to happen just happened. And so that's how I felt a lot of the time reading her book. I thought that the length was a pretty good length. Like I said, it went so fast that I didn't really feel like I was reading 400 pages, so that was nice. Now, to kind of describe the plot without describing the plot, right? Because I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, this is kind of like what happens, but then you're like, oh, you're like definitely spoiling like major plot points in this book if somebody hasn't read it. I didn't read the back, so I'm just going to kind of be very vague about what I say in terms of the plot before we get to spoilers. But when you hear the title, The Teacher, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this could go a particular way. And it does go that way. The way that you're thinking, it goes that way. I'm not going to say anything more about it, but it goes that way. And it's unpleasant. And I wasn't like really hoping to read about that. But I heard there's like a show on Netflix also called The Teacher or something. It may not be on Netflix. It's on some kind of streaming platform. And it's about a similar topic. So if you've seen that, you kind of know what this book is going to insinuate and be about. But you're seeing a picture perfect relationship, and you realize both of the people in the relationship are very unhappy. They're both teachers, surprise, surprise. And you're kind of going through a journey of like discovering why they're unhappy together, how they cope with their unhappiness, and see like future relationships evolve when they're not getting their needs met by each other. That's all I'm going to really say, spoiler free, because I have a lot of thoughts about this book spoiler wise. But in order to lead us into the spoiler section of this video, I want to highlight my rating for this book. And unfortunately, the epilogue gave me my rating. So if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, you got to go read the book. I ended this book with a 3-star rating. And for me, I feel like I'm a pretty generous rater. So if I really like enjoyed a book and thought that it was enjoyable, like the plot points or like the story was enjoyable enough for me to like recommend to somebody, I'm going to rate it 4 or 5 stars. So 3 stars for me is a pretty low rating. And the reason that I didn't go lower than 3 was because I really, for the most part, enjoyed the story. And I thought like it went by really well. It was written well. It was fast paced, and that made it 3 stars. That is what made it 3 stars. The reason it didn't go above 3 stars is because of the epilogue. Which is literally, I mean, it was like a 7-minute epilogue. But still, it ruined the book for me. It really did. I mean, if that part was not in the book at all, I would have been fine. Which is really sad to say. I would have probably rated it a little higher. So that's going to lead us into the spoiler section of this episode. If you have not read the book, please pause here, read the book, come back later. If you don't feel like you're going to read the book, I mean, by all means, feel free to keep watching, but you are going to see spoilers to this book, and I'm going to talk a lot about just my problems with it, unfortunately. So the 2 characters that I was talking about previously that are in an unhappy marriage, one is named Eve, and one is named Nathaniel, which you'll also see him referred to as Nate. And they are married. They are both teachers. Eve is a math teacher. Nate is a English teacher. And they both end up with this student in their class. Her name is Adeline. The book refers to her as Addie a lot, so I'll try to refer to her as Addie just to keep it consistent. she is known as being a troublesome student and is also known for having an affair with a previous teacher. Now, under all pretenses, she denies allegations of this happening, and it doesn't really, I would say it more so insinuates it never happened. It just seems like she kind of stalked her previous teacher, who was an older man. They referred to him looking like Santa Claus quite a bit, which is a little just disturbing image in itself. But what I think happened was she just got very fixated on him and started to stalk him because she viewed him as a father a lot of the time. Because, like I said, she was getting bullied a lot, and her father had passed away, which you later realize she murders him. I hope that if you did not, you just kept watching, that at this point you've read the book, because I'm telling you, spoilers. But I've said that word enough, right? Red flashing sign, spoiler. Because if you want to read the book, I don't want you to keep watching until you've read it. Anyway, so there's this rumor going around that she had an affair with a previous teacher. It ruined her life last year. She's scared to go into the new school year. She's getting bullied, and she can't stand her math teacher, but she loves her English teacher. I don't mean it that way yet. But she just has a very good connection with him. She loves poetry. He loves poetry. They both love Poe. They both have a favorite poem by Poe. And it becomes very quick that, like, they have a very, very common interest. They can carry conversation easily. She stays after school. And all the things that lead up to that ugly, disgusting relationship between them. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that because, like, honestly, the whole time I was reading it, I was like, this is so disturbing. I am a teacher, and I just cannot get past the fact that somebody even wants to write about this. But it's fiction. It's thriller. It's fiction. It's fiction. It's fake. Okay? In this book that I'm talking about, it was fake. So just keep that rolling in the back of your mind, just like I'm doing, so that we can get through this together. They start a relationship. Also realize that the math teacher, right, the two teachers that are married, the math teacher, the female, is also cheating on her husband with a shoe salesman. So unhappy, right? They're both unhappy. They're both looking for other people to satisfy the unfulfilledness of their marriage. And you kind of get it introduced as Eve being the cheater first. So it kind of makes her seem like the bad guy in a way. And then they almost try to make you understand why the teacher and the student are having an affair, which was really disturbing to me because there's no justification behind that relationship happening. And so seeing the inner workings of the, like, teenage mind and what might be going through her head, and then the male mind, what he's saying to her, very predatory, very disgusting. It was hard to get through. I really just wanted to, like, skip through a lot of those chapters. I didn't, just for the sake of, like, getting the well-rounded story, and, like, sometimes there's, like, plot points that end up with holes in them if you skip past, like, in thriller books. So got through them, and then you eventually realize that they want to be together, the student and the teacher, and they come up with this consensus that they can't stand his wife, and Addie acts out on emotion. She harms her physically, calls the teacher because, you know, at this point, Eve has figured out that they're together, and she wants to tell the principal. Addie comes over, she responds, they're trying to talk it out, and Eve's trying to understand where she's coming from, and then just say, like, everything that he's telling you is a lie, and you need to, like, realize that. You need to wake up and realize that, which just, when I tell you the end, it's gonna really throw you for a loop. So she's trying to talk to her. Addie hits her with a frying pan. She falls down, is, like, passed out. You think she might be dead. Addie thinks she might be dead, calls Nate. Nate comes over, previously been kicked out of his house because obviously she caught him in an affair with a student, and that's a big concern. He comes over, tries to help Addie dispose of the body, realizes Eve is not dead, tries to choke her out to actually kill her, They decide to go bury her out in the middle of a pumpkin patch. All the while, like, it switches point of views. You're thinking Eve's dead. She's not actually dead. Okay, which I was like, yes, that was the one redeeming thing, like, that happened in this book for me. I'm like, thank goodness she is not dead, because I did not want her to be dead. I needed her to come back to life, and she did. And usually, like, I think in stories like this, you do have to kind of suspend your belief a little bit of what's going on. Obviously, teacher student relationships have happened in the past. You don't want them to happen, and it's completely disgusting and disturbing and should never happen. But, like, in terms of that, like, okay, it could happen. But I think sometimes, like, when you're raising people from the dead or trying to kill them off, like, you're kind of having to suspend your belief just a little bit. So anyway, she gets buried. She comes back. She's torturing Nate. Addie is trying to understand what they did. I mean, she's 16 at this point. She's trying to understand, her relationship with Nate, why he's acting weird at this point, if they're going to have a future together. Obviously, the signs weren't pointing to the fact that they were going to have a future together, understandably so. And then you realize it's kind of eating her alive a little bit. And then her previous bully, the one that has been, like, torturing her throughout school, comes into play and goes, hey, this is happening to me too. It started when I was 14. I saw this, like, poem that he wrote to you. He wrote it to me too. And let's go to the cops together. That's sort of how, like, it starts to resolve. And then you realize Eve's alive and she decides to kill her husband, which, go her, she should. I mean, for the sake of the story, not an actual, like, but for the sake of the story, good for her. I'm glad she killed him. Then throughout the story, you've met this best friend of Addie's, who is also best friends with Kinsey, but they didn't like each other for the longest time. So he went from being, like, Addie's best friend to Kinsey's best friend. His name is Hudson. A lot of his friends call him Jay. Well, during our lovely, lovely, lovely epilogue, a few things happen. I think the end of the story, the first thing that disturbed me was you find out that Eve used to be a student of Nate's. So their age gap was enough to have been, she was his student right when he was out of college, and, like, they get together. Not as big of an age gap, still very disturbing. So that, I was like, okay, you could end the story here. I'm mind blown enough to, like, be satisfied. No. Freida McFadden did not do this. She wanted to wrap a lovely, nice little bow on the end of this story, this disturbing story. And what she ended up doing was framing Jay, this best friend character who's still in high school, as Eve's lover, the one that she's been having an affair with this whole time. What? We previously know about him that he is married, has a child, works at the shoe store, at least with enough responsibility to close up the shoe store, which is where they meet when they are having this affair. Okay, most teenage boys aren't going to be given that privilege. And you're getting mad at him for having this teenage relationship, but then, like, in the end, you're going to say she's having a teenage relationship? What? I'm sorry. But for me, I was completely dissatisfied with this, and I was very frustrated. I wanted to chuck my Kindle across the room. That was the worst way, in my opinion, to end the story. It just didn't make sense because, yes, he has a younger brother. At that point, it's like, okay, what story is real about Hudson? You see him in school. Eve recommended him as a math tutor for Addie. He's clearly a student. She's clearly interacted with him before. How does she not know or put together the pieces that he's the owner of the shoe store? It doesn't make any sense in my mind, right? Like, I don't know what Freida McFadden was thinking. And I also want to say, like, she is a writer. She put her soul into this work, and, like, I appreciate her for that. And I'm glad I read it. I guess at the end of the day, I want to read more of her books. But for that ending of the book, I was very shocked and very frustrated. And so for all those reasons, I gave the book 3 stars. But it did intrigue me to want to read more of Freida McFadden's titles, so I'm actually going to try to start the Housemaid, I believe is what it's called, soon, because I've heard good things about that one. So that's going to be my next trial with her, just simply because I really liked how fast-paced her books were, and I liked her writing style. But anyway, those are my thoughts on The Teacher. If you hadn't read it and you made it this far, you basically know everything that happens, but read it for yourself if you want to. If you have read it and you disagree with my opinion, feel free to let me know in the comments. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye! The pages to the skies, fantasy and romance blooms in her heart and in her room.